The wagon rattled to a stop outside the Bitter Creek Saloon just as the sun broke over the ridge, casting long shadows across the dirt street. 4 girls sat huddled in the back, bare feet, torn dresses, faces smudged with days of dust and tears. The oldest couldn't have been more than 14. The youngest looked maybe 6, clutching a rag doll with one arm missing. Their uncle stood at the front of the wagon, boots planted wide, hat tipped back. He was grinning. 4 strong girls, he called out to the handful of men gathering near the hitching post. Good with chores, don't eat much, no family left but me, and I got no use for 'em. Figured somebody here might. One of the girls, the second oldest, maybe 12, whispered something to the eldest. The eldest shook her head sharply, pulled the younger ones closer. Her eyes were red but dry, like she'd already cried everything out days ago. A man in a dusty coat stepped forward, squinting at the wagon. "You sellin' your kin, Mercer?" The uncle shrugged. "Their mama was my sister, she's dead. Their daddy got himself shot over a card game in Dodge. I took 'em in out of charity, but charity don't pay bills. They're old enough to work. Somebody'll get good use out of 'em." The youngest girl started to cry, soft, broken little sounds. The eldest covered the child's mouth gently, whispering something none of the men could hear. From the far end of the street, a figure emerged from the general store, a tall man, broad-shouldered, face like weathered stone. His name was Caleb Thorne, and most folks in Bitter Creek knew him as the angriest son of a bitch in 3 counties. He'd lost his wife and infant daughter to fever 6 years back, and since then he worked his ranch alone, spoke to no one, and came to town only when supplies ran low. He stopped mid-step when he saw the wagon, saw the girls, saw the uncle's grin. Caleb's jaw tightened. He walked forward slowly, boots crunching gravel, spurs clinking soft against the morning quiet. The men near the wagon shifted, glanced at each other. Caleb Thorne wasn't a man you crossed lightly, not because he was loud or cruel, but because when he got angry, it was the kind of anger that burned cold and left nothing standing. "What's this?" Caleb's voice was low, rough as gravel scraped over iron. The uncle turned, sizing him up. "Business, Thorne. Got 4 girls here need work. You interested?" Caleb didn't answer right away. His eyes moved to the wagon. The eldest girl stared back at him, and for a moment something flickered in her expression, hope maybe, or fear, hard to tell. "They got names?" Caleb asked. The uncle waved a hand dismissively. "Oldest is Clara, then there's Josie, Ruth, and the little one's Bess. Like I said, good workers, won't give you trouble." Caleb stepped closer to the wagon. The girls flinched, all except Clara, who held his gaze. Her hands were trembling, but she didn't look away. "You want to be sold?" Caleb asked her directly. Clara's lips parted. She hesitated, then shook her head once. Slow, deliberate. "Didn't think so," Caleb muttered. He turned back to the uncle. "How much?" The uncle's grin widened. "Now we're talking $100 for all 4. "100, one of the other men scoffed. "That's robbery, Mercer." "Then don't buy 'em," the uncle shot back. "But somebody will. Girls are useful, cheaper than hearing help." Caleb reached into his coat, pulled out a worn leather pouch. He counted out bills slowly, deliberately, then held them up. $100, but let's be clear, I'm not buying people, I'm getting them away from you. The uncle snatched the money, stuffed it into his pocket. "Don't matter to me what you call it, Thorne, they're yours now." He spat into the dirt, climbed onto the wagon seat, and snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward, wheels creaking as it rolled away down the street. The 4 girls stood frozen in the dust where the wagon had been. Clara's arms were still wrapped around her sister's. Bess was crying into Ruth's shoulder. Josie stared at Caleb like he might vanish if she blinked. Caleb stood there a moment, hands on his hips, staring after the departing wagon. His face was unreadable. Then he turned back to the girls. "Come on," he said quietly. "You're coming with me." Clara didn't move. "Where?" "My ranch, 10 miles west." He gestured toward his horse tied outside the store. "Can you ride?" "Not all of us," Clara said. Caleb nodded once. "Then we'll figure it out." He walked to the store, returned a moment later with a canteen and a small sack of biscuits. He handed them to Clara. Eat, drink, we leave in 5 minutes. Clara took the canteen carefully, like it might break. Why'd you do that? Caleb didn't answer right away. He adjusted his hat, looked past her toward the horizon where the wagon had disappeared. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. Because some things, he said, you don't walk past. Clara studied him for a long moment, then she nodded. The ride to the Thorn Ranch was silent except for the creak of saddle leather and the soft rhythm of hoofbeats. Caleb rode with Bess in front of him, the child clinging to the saddle horn with both hands. Clara and Josie shared his pack horse, and Ruth walked alongside, holding the stirrup. When they crested the final ridge, the ranch spread out below, a sturdy log house, a barn, a corral with a few horses grazing, modest but well kept. Smoke curled from the chimney. Caleb reined in, helped Bess down, then the others. He pointed toward the house. Inside, there's a stove, water pumps by the back door, I'll bring in wood. The girls hesitated at the threshold. It was Clara who stepped inside first. The others followed. Caleb stood outside a moment longer, staring at the door. His hands were shaking just slightly. He clenched them into fists, exhaled slowly. He hadn't planned this, hadn't planned anything. But when he'd seen those girls in that wagon, something in him cracked open, something he'd buried 6 years ago beneath silence and work and anger. He turned toward the barn. There was firewood to split, fences to mend, work that needed doing. But for the first time in 6 years, Caleb Thorne's ranch didn't feel quite so empty. Inside the house, the girls stood clustered near the door, uncertain. The main room was simple: wooden table, chairs, a stone fireplace, shelves lined with tin cups and plates. Clean but sparse, it didn't look like a place where children lived. Clara moved first. She set Bess down gently on a chair, then walked to the stove. "We should start a fire," she said quietly to Josie. "He'll want supper." Josie nodded, moved to help. Ruth fetched water from the pump. Bess sat motionless, clutching her doll, watching everything with wide, frightened eyes. Outside, Caleb split wood with methodical precision. Each swing of the axe was controlled, deliberate. He didn't stop until the pile was tall enough to last a week. Then he stacked it by the door, washed his hands at the pump, and stepped inside. The girls went still. Caleb hung his hat on a peg, glanced around. The fire was lit. Water was heating in a kettle. Clara stood near the table, hands folded in front of her. "You know how to cook?" Caleb asked. Clara nodded. "Yes, sir." "Don't call me sir," he said. "Caleb's fine." "Yes, Clara caught herself. "Caleb." He moved to a cupboard, pulled out cornmeal, salt pork, a jar of beans, set them on the table. "Make what you can with that. I'll be in the barn. Come get me when it's ready." He turned to leave, then paused, looked back at Clara. "Your Uncle Mercer, where's he from?" Clara's face tightened. "Fort Griffin, used to run freight wagons before the war." Caleb's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "And your folks, how'd they die?" Clara hesitated. Josie stepped closer as if to shield her, but Clara spoke anyway. "Mama got sick last winter, fever. Papa tried to get medicine, but," her voice wavered, "he borrowed money, couldn't pay it back, got into a fight." "Who'd he owe?" "Some men from town. They said he cheated at cards, said he owed $300. Clara's hands clenched. "Papa didn't cheat, he wasn't like that." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "What was your daddy's name?" Elijah Brennan." The name hit Caleb like a fist to the gut. He didn't flinch, but his jaw went tight. He turned away, stared at the wall. "Brennan," he repeated softly. Clara frowned. "Did you know him?" Caleb didn't answer. He walked to the mantel, picked up a small wooden box, opened it. Inside was a tarnished silver pocket watch, the chain broken. He held it up to the light, turned it over. On the back, engraved in worn letters, EB 1859. Clara's breath caught. "That's your father's," Caleb finished. His voice was flat, hollow. "I know." Josie stepped forward. "How do you have that?" Caleb set the watch down carefully, like it might shatter. He didn't look at them. 8 months ago, I was in Fort Griffin, picking up supplies. There was a card game at the back of the saloon. Your father was there. So was a man named Doyle, hired gun, worked for a cattle baron named Strand. Clara's face went pale. Caleb continued. I was at the bar, heard them arguing. Doyle accused Elijah of cheating. Your father denied it. Doyle pulled a gun. Caleb's hands curled into fists. I saw the whole thing. Elijah wasn't armed. Doyle shot him anyway. Then he took everything Elijah had, money, watch, even his boots. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. And you did nothing. Caleb finally looked at her. His face was stone, but his eyes, God, his eyes were haunted. I didn't stop it. I told myself it wasn't my business, told myself I didn't know Elijah, didn't owe him anything. His voice dropped. I walked out of that saloon and rode home, and your father died bleeding on that floor. The room was silent, except for the crackle of the fire. Clara's voice trembled. You let him die. Yes. And you took his watch. No, Caleb shook his head. 3 weeks later I went back, found Doyle in another saloon, beat him half to death and took it back. Didn't give it to your family because, he stopped, exhaled slowly, because I didn't know where you were and I didn't think it would matter. Josie spoke up, voice sharp. So you bought us to feel better, to fix what you didn't do. Caleb turned to her. I didn't buy you to fix anything. I bought you because your uncle's a bastard and I wasn't gonna let him sell children like cattle. He picked up the watch again, held it out to Clara. But you're right, I should have stopped it. I didn't, and I've been carrying that with me ever since. Clara stared at the watch. Slowly, she reached out, took it from his hand. Her fingers traced the engraving. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He loved this watch, she whispered. Said his father gave it to him before the war. I know, Caleb said quietly. Clara looked up at him, eyes red and blazing. You think giving it back makes it right? No, Caleb said, but it's yours, and so is the truth. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Ruth spoke for the first time since they'd arrived. Her voice was small, uncertain. What happens to us now? Caleb looked at her, then at the others. You stay here, work if you want, learn if you want, leave when you're old enough if that's what you choose. He paused. But while you're here, nobody owns you, not me, not anybody. Clara wiped her eyes, closed her fist around the watch. Why should we trust you? Caleb met her gaze. You shouldn't, but I'll prove it anyway. He turned and walked out the door, leaving the 4 girls standing in the firelight. 2 weeks passed. The girls settled into a rhythm. Clara cooked, Josie tended the chickens, Ruth helped mend fences, and Bess followed Caleb around the ranch like a shadow. He didn't mind. Taught her how to feed the horses, how to check for stones in their hooves. She still didn't talk much, but sometimes she smiled. Caleb kept his distance, worked from dawn till dark. He slept in the barn most nights, gave the girls the house. Spoke only when necessary, but he watched them, made sure they had enough to eat, enough warmth, enough space to breathe. Clara watched him too. She didn't forgive him, didn't trust him, but she noticed things, the way he brought extra firewood without being asked, the way he fixed the broken window in the back room, the way he never raised his voice, never came too close. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a rider appeared on the ridge. Caleb saw him first. He was splitting wood near the barn when he heard hoofbeats. He set down the axe, wiped his hands on his trousers, and waited. The rider came closer, a lean man in a black coat, badge pinned to his chest. Sheriff Wade Coulter from Bitter Creek. He reined in, tipped his hat. Caleb. Sheriff. Coulter glanced toward the house, where the girls were visible through the window. Heard you took in some children. That's right. Coulter dismounted, tied his horse to the fence post. Mind if we talk? Caleb nodded once. They walked a few paces away from the house. Coulter pulled out a rolled piece of paper, handed it to Caleb. Got a complaint, Coulter said, from a man named Mercer, says you stole his nieces. Caleb unrolled the paper. It was a legal notice, custody claim. Mercer was demanding the girls be returned to his care. Claimed Caleb had coerced him, taken them unlawfully. Caleb's jaw tightened. I paid him in front of witnesses. He says you threatened him, says he was afraid for his life. Coulter sighed. Look, Caleb, I don't believe him, but the law's the law. He's got a claim, you don't. He was selling them. He says he was arranging work. That's horseshit, and you know it. Coulter held up a hand. I'm not arguing with you, but Mercer's got a lawyer now, some slick bastard out of Fort Griffin. They're pushing this. If you don't give the girls back, they'll get a judge involved. Caleb crumpled the paper in his fist. Over my dead body. Don't say that, Coulter's voice dropped. Mercer's connected. Works for Strand now, you know, the cattle baron. Strand's got half the county in his pocket. You push this, they'll bury you. Caleb stared at him. So you're telling me to hand 4 children back to a man who sold them like livestock? Coulter looked away. I'm telling you to be smart. You're one man, Caleb. You can't fight this. Watch me. Coulter shook his head. You're gonna get yourself killed, and those girls, they'll end up right back where they started, maybe worse. Caleb was silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, what would you do, Wade, if it was you? Coulter didn't answer. He climbed back on his horse, looked down at Caleb. I'll stall him as long as I can, but Mercer's coming, probably tomorrow, maybe the day after. He tipped his hat. Be ready. He rode off, dust rising in his wake. Chloe. I was waiting on the porch when Caleb walked back. Her arms were crossed. We heard. Caleb stopped at the bottom step. You were listening. We are not stupid. Clara's voice was sharp. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Are you going to give us back? Caleb looked her in the eye. No. Even if they come with guns? Yes. Clara's expression wavered. Why, you said it yourself. You didn't stop them before. Why now? Caleb climbed the steps slowly, stopped a few feet away. Because I didn't stop it before, he said, and I won't make that mistake again. Clara's eyes glistened. You can't fight them all. Maybe not. Caleb glanced toward the horizon, where the sun was sinking into blood-red clouds. But I can try. That night Caleb didn't sleep. He sat on the porch, rifle across his knees, staring at the dark road. The girls were inside, huddled together near the fire. Every now and then he heard Clara's voice, soft and steady, comforting the others. He thought about Elijah Brennan, about the watch, about the way he'd walked out of that saloon and told himself it wasn't his problem. He'd been walking away his whole life. Not this time. The next morning, riders appeared on the ridge, 4 of them. Mercer was in front, flanked by 2 hired guns. Behind them, a man in a pressed suit, the lawyer no doubt. Caleb stood in the yard, rifle in hand. The girls watched from the window. Mercer grinned when he saw him. Thorne, you ready to hand over my property? Caleb didn't move, didn't speak. The lawyer rode forward, pulled out a document. Mr. Thorne, I represent Mr. Mercer in this custody matter. You are hereby ordered to return the minor children to their legal guardian. Failure to comply will result in arrest. Caleb spat into the dirt. Get off my land. Mercer laughed. You hear that, boys? Man thinks he owns these girls now. One of the hired guns, a scarred man with a revolver on his hip, spoke up. We can do this easy or hard, Thorne, your choice. Caleb raised the rifle, pointed it at Mercer's chest. My choice is you leave, now. The hired guns drew their weapons. The lawyer's horse shifted nervously. Mercer's grin faded. Last chance, Thorne, Mercer said. Give 'em up or we take 'em. Caleb's finger moved to the trigger. And then hoofbeats from behind. Everyone turned. A dozen riders crested the hill, ranch hands from neighboring spreads, men Caleb had worked beside years ago. At the front was an older man named Garrett, gray-bearded and weathered. Garrett reined in beside Caleb, rifle resting on his saddle. Problem here, Caleb. Caleb didn't lower his weapon. These men are leaving. Garrett looked at Mercer, then at the hired guns. You heard him. Mercer's face went red. This is none of your damn business, Garrett. It is now, another rider, a woman named Mary Hollies moved her horse forward. We heard what you did, Mercer, selling children, figured Caleb might need a hand. The hired guns glanced at each other. Outnumbered now, the lawyer cleared his throat. This isn't over, we'll return with a court order. You do that, Garrett said, but you won't find these girls. Mercer's jaw worked, then he yanked his reins, turned his horse. Come on, the others followed. They rode off, dust swirling behind them. Caleb lowered his rifle, turned to Garrett. Didn't expect you. Garrett shrugged, heard you needed help, figured it was time somebody stood up to Strand's men. He glanced at the house, where the girls' faces pressed against the window. Those the children. Caleb nodded. Then you did right, Caleb. Garrett tipped his hat. We'll keep an eye out. Mercer comes back, you send word. The riders turned and left, one by one. Caleb stood alone in the yard, staring after them. Clara stepped out onto the porch. They came for you. Caleb nodded slowly. Yeah, they did. The days that followed were quieter. Caleb worked the ranch. The girls settled deeper into routines. But something had shifted. Clara watched him differently now, not with trust, not yet, but with something softer. Curiosity, maybe. One afternoon, Caleb found her in the barn, brushing down his mare. He stopped in the doorway, surprised. She likes you, he said. Clara glanced up. I used to help Papa with horses before. Caleb nodded, stepped inside. He picked up a brush, started working on the gelding in the next stall. They worked in silence for a while, just the sound of bristles on hide, the soft breathing of animals. Finally, Clara spoke. You really didn't know we were his daughters. No, not till you told me his name. And if you had known. Caleb paused. I'd have come looking for you sooner. Clara set down the brush, turned to face him. You can't fix it, you know what happened. I know. Then why keep us here? Why risk everything? Caleb met her eyes. Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. Clara studied him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, my father would have liked you, even after. Everything, he didn't hold grudges. Caleb's throat tightened. He nodded once, went back to brushing. That evening, Bess brought him something. She walked out to the porch where he sat watching the sunset and held up a small carved horse, rough, uneven, but clearly made with care. I made this, she whispered, first words she'd spoken to him directly. Caleb took it carefully, turned it over in his hands. It's real good, Bess. It's for you, 'cause you saved us. Caleb's chest ached. He crouched down, met her eyes. You didn't need savin, little one. You were already strong. I just gave you a place to be strong. Bess smiled, a small, fragile thing. Then she hugged him, quick and tight, before running back inside. Caleb stayed on the porch a long time after that, holding the carved horse. So let me ask you, if you were Caleb, knowing you failed once before, would you risk everything to make it right? Or would you have walked away again? Think about that while you pour yourself something warm and settle in. Tap subscribe if you're still with me, because what happens next changes everything. A week later, Clara asked him to teach her to shoot. Caleb hesitated, then agreed. They set up cans on the fence posts, and he showed her how to hold the rifle, how to aim, how to breathe. She missed the first 6 shots, hit the 7th. Good, Caleb said, again. By the end of the afternoon, she was hitting 3 out of 5. Caleb reloaded the rifle, handed it back. Why do you want to learn? Clara lowered the weapon. So next time someone comes, I can help. Caleb nodded, fair enough. That night, Clara sat on the porch beside him. The others were asleep inside. The stars were bright overhead. Thank you, Clara said softly, for everything. Caleb glanced at her. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. She looked down at the watch in her hand, her father's watch. He used to say, people remember how you act when it matters. I think he'd remember you now. Caleb's voice was rough. I hope so. Clara stood, walked to the door, then paused. Caleb. Yes. I forgive you. She went inside before he could respond. Caleb sat alone on the porch, staring at the stars. For the first time in 6 years, the weight on his chest felt lighter. Spring came slowly to the Thorn Ranch. The grass turned green, wildflowers bloomed along the fence line, and the 4 girls grew stronger. Clara learned to shoot as well as Caleb. Josie planted a vegetable garden. Ruth built a chicken coop with help from Garrett's son. Bess carved small animals from scraps of wood and left them around the house like gifts. Mercer never returned. Garrett sent word through town. Strand's lawyer dropped the custody claim after witnesses came forward about the auction. Mercer left the territory entirely. Rumor had it. Some said he owed money. Others said he was afraid of what Caleb might do if he came back. Caleb didn't care which story was true. He only cared that the girls were safe. One afternoon in late May, a stranger rode up to the ranch. Caleb walked out to meet him, rifle in hand as always, but the man raised both hands, showing he was unarmed. "I'm looking for Clara Brennan," the man said. "I'm her mother's brother, named Samuel." Clara appeared on the porch. She stared at the man, eyes wide. "Uncle Sam." The man dismounted, took off his hat. "Clara, my God, girl, I thought I'd never—" His voice broke. He looked older than Caleb expected, worn down by hard years. "I've been searching for months, heard what Mercer did. I came as fast as I could." Clara didn't move. Caleb glanced at her, then back at Samuel. "You got proof of who you are." Samuel pulled a photograph from his coat, faded, creased. It showed a young woman holding an infant, a man standing beside her. "That's my sister. Your mother, Clara, took that picture 16 years ago before I headed west." Clara walked down the steps slowly, took the photograph. Her hands trembled. "Where were you?" "California, mining. Didn't know your mother had passed till a month ago. Didn't know about the girls till last week." Samuel's voice was thick with guilt. "I'm sorry, Clara. I should have been there." Clara stared at the photograph. Then she looked at Caleb. He nodded once. "Your choice." Clara turned back to Samuel. "You want to take us with you?" Samuel hesitated. "If that's what you want. I got a small place in Sacramento. It's not much, but—" "No." Samuel blinked. "No." Clara's voice was steady. "We're staying here." "Clara." "Caleb gave us a home. He fought for us. He taught us how to stand." She folded the photograph carefully, handed it back. "I'm glad you're alive, Uncle Sam, but this is where we belong now." Samuel looked at Caleb. "Is this what you want?" Caleb shook his head. "Not about what I want, it's their choice." Samuel stood there a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then I'll stay nearby, Bitter Creek maybe, so I can visit." He looked at Clara. "If that's all right." Clara smiled, a real smile, the first Caleb had seen from her. "We'd like that." The years rolled on. Clara grew into a formidable woman, sharp-eyed, steady-handed, respected throughout the county. She took over much of the ranch work, worked beside Caleb like a partner. When she turned 18, he signed half the ranch over to her. She cried when he did it, said she didn't deserve it. He told her she'd earned it twice over. Josie became a school teacher, taught children in Bitter Creek. Ruth married Garrett's son, started her own ranch 2 valleys over. Bess, quiet, gentle Bess, became a sculptor, carved animals, and sold them as far as St. Louis. Samuel visited every few months, brought gifts, told stories about their mother. The girls loved him, but they never left the ranch. Caleb grew older, quieter. His anger faded, replaced by something steadier. He built a second house on the property so the girls would have space when they married, had families of their own. One evening, 10 years after that first morning in Bitter Creek, Caleb sat on the porch watching the sunset. Clara sat beside him, gray beginning to thread through her hair. "You ever regret it?" she asked, "taking us in?" Caleb shook his head. "Not once. Even knowing what it cost." "Cost?" Caleb glanced at her. "Clara, you gave me a reason to wake up. Before you, I was just existing. You reminded me what it means to live." Clara rested her head on his shoulder. "Papa would have been proud of you." Caleb's voice was soft. "I hope so." They sat in silence as the sun dipped below the ridge, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. From inside the house came the sound of laughter, Josie and Ruth visiting for supper, Bess showing off her latest carving. Caleb closed his eyes, listened to the sound of family. He'd saved 4 girls from a heartless uncle, but in truth, they'd saved him first. Years later, when Caleb Thorne finally passed, old and content, surrounded by the women he'd raised and the grandchildren they'd given him, they buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch. Clara carved his headstone herself, chiseled the words with her own hands. Caleb Thorne, 1829, 1891. He stood when it mattered. And beneath it, she placed a small carved horse, the one Bess had made all those years ago. It sits there still, weathered by wind and rain, a reminder of what one angry man created when he chose not to walk away. The ranch still stands. Clara's great-granddaughter runs it now. She teaches her children the same lessons Clara taught her, how to stand, how to fight, how to forgive. And every spring, when the wildflowers bloom along the fence line, they remember the man who gave 4 lost girls a home, and in doing so, found his own.